Hello, today we'll be looking at two exciting packages from HobbyMate, but just before we get into that, a quick reminder, please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it, comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and if you can find that little bell icon, click on it, and depending on YouTube's mood, it might tell you when I'm uploading stuff. So, today we have a charger from HobbyMate and a power supply for it. Now, HobbyMate is perhaps my most used charger. This is my sort of the daily driver. This is the D6 Duo Pro. 2 ports on it, AC power supply, though you can run it off DC. It's really fast and really efficient at both charging and putting batteries in the storage charge. Also, you can put your phone on top in it, wirelessly charge it that way. The other one that sits on my desk is this one. This is called the HobbyMate Speed H6 Smart Charger. It did a couple of things that this one didn't do, namely it works as a desktop power supply, so I have this on my desk most of the time and I use it to solder with these soldering irons that run off an XT60 plugged in here. It's also got this little servo style port on the back, so you can do diagnostics, PWM, that sort of thing. So this is called the D6 Duo Lite, and it kind of combines both of them but in a smaller package. So if I just get this out of the box, you have basically some instructions. And in here, the actual D6 Duo Lite, and you can see it's smaller and lighter. You can't see it's lighter, but it is lighter because it doesn't have the power supply in it than this equivalent. And this one will run off this XT60, anything from 10.5 to 30 volts input. It's also got the servo lead out there for doing diagnostic stuff. It's a dual charger, so 2 XT60s, 2 up to 6S balance leads. And as most of these things will, it's got a regular USB port to put out up to 2.1 amps. It's also got USB Type-C there, and that's the micro USB for updating the firmware. So that's part of it. That's one price. It comes on its own, or you can buy it in a pair, which is where this bit comes into it. Because if you want a portable thing and you've already got a power supply, or you want to run it off a big battery in the field, there's that on its own. Or you've got this smart power supply. Now this is a UK version, so it's got the UK plug. Other versions are available, Europe, US, that sort of thing. So this is in the box, and you get this XT60 to XT60 adapter. It's male to female. UK plug, of course you'll get the one you want to in your region. And the power supply itself, which looks like this. Not an awful lot going on. Again, it's got outputs for regular USB and USB Type-C, and then around the back it's got AC input and DC output. And so the idea is you plug in with this lead, plug into this one here, and you've basically got the equivalent of this and this, but in one box. Now I do notice that this seems magnetized and it kind of wants to sit like that. I'm not sure if you're supposed to do that. I've just emailed them to find out. Otherwise you're pretty much putting it down like this to use it. But yeah, let's take a look. It's slightly different firmware, I noticed, to what's on this one. So let's go close up and see what's going on there, and we'll run through the features and see what we can do with it. Okay, so here we are close up, and one thing I need to talk about before we start is the noise, because I've used this already. I've charged and discharged some batteries, and I noticed the noise straight away. Now, if I just plug this in via battery, its fan starts up, and then it's quiet. It will get noisier as the fan goes. But if I plug in this guy, this fan is pretty noisy and is on all the time. It's not, you know, super noisy, but it's a fan noise that you can hear all the time. And it's significantly noisier than if we were just using this guy. Which, while it's not doing anything, kind of shuts off again, but this, louder. But with that said, let's carry on. Now, I've mentioned before that you can obviously put these on top of one another. I checked with HobbyMate and they said, yeah, you can do that, but you don't have to. It's up to you. I'm not going to do it for this one just because I can work on a close-up on this one if I want to. Also, you've got little feet here. I guess that might help with heat dissipation. That's on both the power supply and the charger, so we can do that. So let's plug this in. and we'll plug it in over here. Also, I'm hoping it'll be less loud, but it's quite loud, I think that's fair to say. So first things first, very similar to the regular D6 Duo Pro in terms that there's a simple single button, and that moves you between the two channels, and then it's got this slider or rotary control for doing things. The first thing I'm going to do is go into settings, because I don't know if you can hear how loud that beep is, but you got all the normal stuff, parameters here, safety timer, M capacitor, trickle charge, all that gubbins, system parameters, Regen Discharge, we'll come up to that in a second. One I want to sort out. There you go, your ears are saved. I've turned it off. You can make a device name, and if you have that, it'll appear here where it just says name at the moment. I guess just in case you're with other people doing stuff. And was there anything else in there of interest? Let's have a look. Nope. You got the calibrations, system self-check, reset to factory settings, system info. This is what we're running at the moment. As said, it can be upgraded via this USB port there, specifically for upgrading the firmware. So since we're in this menu, the first thing I'll look at here is the tools menu, and we got Ppm Measurement, manual, servo manual test, servo auto test, and ppm out. So the first one here, Ppm Measurement, is about basically what you're getting from a ppm signal. I've got this thing here. If you watch LDO, you'd know what this is. This is a horrible model that I built from scrap parts that Frank gave me, and I've got a little receiver in here, and if I connect up one of the ports via here, and it will put out the 5 volts in order to power the receiver, and you should be able to see here that the actual servo I've got's moving. So I've put this on channel 4, so if I move that, you can see this measurement moving here. Let me just zoom in. I did kind of expect that this would animate the graphic. You can see the value moving on the T1 and T2, but there's no animation there. I don't know why, but it does the job, I guess. It tells us what we're doing, kind of. So let's come out of that, and if we plug, I've got this little servo here. If I plug that guy in, so we can see it. And we've got two ones here. We've got the manual test. So as we move our USEX, which is really hard to read in that blue colour, you can see our servo moving. Much more sensible though is the servo auto test. And we've got a low, medium, and high. Not brilliant in their own, but fairly useful. And then I'm not going to hook this up, but we've got a ppm out, so you can hook up something that talks ppm to this. You can set all the individual channels and it will do stuff. I've never been completely clear on the function of that, but it's there, it's available. Right, so let's talk about the actual main charging screen now. I quite like this split display. I've come to like that. This is a slightly different display than it's on my D6 Duo, but nice and clear. And if we go into channel 1, and I've just got a battery sat here for usefulness. Let's just plug that in quick. And then in the specific channel screens, we've got the voltages of each of the cells. We've got the overall voltage, and then we're talking about the number of amps we're putting in, the number of milliamp hours we've put in, the number of watts. And if you go to the split screen, it kind of tries to put as much information as it can. And if we rotate, it will give me the voltage input, the temperature,
how many watt hours and how many times we've used this charge. As I said, I've charged a bunch of stuff and discharged previously. So if we then press that in, we have our option of various tasks. Quite a few in this. We've got power supply, we'll come to that later. We've got the normal charge, which is a balanced charge. It just doesn't call itself balanced charge for some reason. We've got discharge, which is, as it sounds, we discharge to a certain voltage. We've got external discharge, not to be confused with regenerative discharge. In this case, we have something attached to here which is basically a resistor load, which we basically discharge as heat to. Storage charge, pretty self-explanatory. Balance isn't the same as balanced charging, it's balance your cells to a certain voltage. Regen discharge, this is where you've got, if you had a big battery connected to here, you could discharge your normal battery into that battery. And this is when we come to saying what sort of battery we have as our discharge in those settings, so we didn't overcharge it. And then we've got something called sync charge, which I don't know what it is. I'm having a guess though, because I couldn't find there's a manual for this yet. I have asked a question, so if I get an answer, I'll put it down here or overdub something. But I think sync charge is about using both of the ports to charge one battery. And I'm basing this on the fact that if I say I want to charge something, if I look at how many amps I can put in there on a single port, I can put 15 amps in. If I go and say I want to do a sync charge, it lets me put 22 amps in, which sounds like it needs more than one port, but I'll see if I can find out what the answer is for that one. So if I just put that into charge, this is a battery that's not empty anyway, and this is a 4S, it's a 5.2 amps, so let's charge at 5.2 and then say start task. That obviously comes up and starts charging. And you'll get to know these colours. There's a colour for charging, a colour for balancing, and the different ones to say fast charge is done and it's going into balance and that sort of thing. And if we go onto the split screen, it'll give you a sort of features of where it is in terms of what's happening and what the other one's doing. So it's a nice easy thing to look at. So if we go back into there and we use the rotary slider now, what we get, as for many of these charges, we get an internal resistance measurement. Pretty good on those cells, not too bad at all. But always take them with a slight pinch of salt. I always use them as a useful thing to compare against. If you've got a battery you know is good, this is what it's coming out, and you've got one that's knows it's bad, and you've got higher, then you kind of know where the sort of dodgy parts are. And here we can see we've got 5 amps going in, the number of milliamp hours going in, how many watts, and the overall voltage. And if we carry on going that way, we just basically see the watt hours, the temperature going up, and the amount of input voltage we've got going in there. Now, as with all these duo chargers, you can do completely different batteries or types of charge in one or the other port. So what I'm going to do in this one, I'm going to plug in this little 3S, which I'm going to discharge. You'll notice I'm having to use adapters here because, of course, these are XT60s, and this is on a JST, but it's a little 3S, as I said. So let's plug this guy in, and what I want to do with this is, let's say I'm going to go into storage, and this is an 800 milliamp hours. You'll see it comes up with the cell count automatically, but you can obviously override it. And I'm going to start that, and that's going to get going. And now the split screen makes a bit more sense. When things are done, apart from the fact you'll see the colour change, and when you're doing a charge there's a colour change from when fast charge is done and a different one after the balance, it comes up a different colour. It also beeps at you, and you can configure the beeps if you want to. You can see here it looks like our storage is done now, and it's gone to green. And what it's doing here, we've got trickle on, so it just keeps making sure that's going to stay at the 3.8 volts that we've asked it to do. And as mentioned, around the back here you have got a 2.1 amp USB connector. So if you wanted to charge your phone in the same time, then that will start charging. Okay, it's probably worth mentioning some stats about exactly what this can do. At the moment I'm putting this big 4S battery in storage charge, and it's doing this at minus 0.4 amps. Basically the internal discharge can do 12 watts, which at a 4S is about 0.4 amps. On a single cell it would be 3 amps. Now, should you be doing regenerative or external discharging, this can go up to 300 watts, which is, it says 15 amps, I'm guessing that's on a single cell though, so slightly less depending the number of cells you have. But obviously internal discharge is much less than external discharge. Charge current for the internal, as long as you've got this sort of power supply greater than 22 volts, is at 15 amps. Again, that is on like a single cell basis. 300 watts, whatever that translates into, depending how many cells you've got going. It certainly manages to 5.2 amps per channel that this requires on a 4S. So as far as doing the power supply, what I've done here, I've just plugged in this lead to this soldering iron. So if we go into power supply, output voltage 24 volts, start the task there. That is outputting power, and if we turn this on, it's going to focus. Let's see how quickly that goes up to power. Yeah, as you can see, pretty quick. Ready to solder straight away, basically. Turn it back off again. Wow, that is the fan running at full effect, and it's really going for it now. It's pretty loud, and this is with the microphone pointed towards myself. But I've used this, as I mentioned, for a couple of days out now, and you know, we've only done sort of 7 pieces through this one, but it's performing very much the same as this guy, which is my trusted and tried charger, so I'm happy with that. As I said, the only downside of this one is that noise. It's pretty loud. As far as stacking goes, it makes it a little bit more compact. The only thing I'd say is sometimes you get very short balance leads on some of these batteries. These ones aren't too bad actually. These are a proper size, so they can just sit down. But you'll just have to maybe be a bit careful you're not sort of hanging it off the balance lead. Perhaps some extensions are useful here, which is normally what I use actually for charging.
Well, there you go. That's my test of the HobbyMate D6 Duo or Dual Lite. And I quite like it, but I thought it would do because I generally do like the HobbyMate chargers. I have to say, they are not cheap chargers. They are on the premium end, but I kind of think that chargers is a place where I don't mind putting the money in, because at the end of the day it's about charging and discharging or storage charging your batteries, and this has to be done fast and efficiently. You don't want to be waiting around for batteries to charge, and you also want to keep your batteries in really good shape after you finish using them. So decent charger, whichever one it is well worth it. Now, I haven't delved into all the functions, and that's because they were kind of it does the same half as this and the other half of that. So I have got a playlist up here of all chargers, and you can check all the HobbyMate ones out along with some others if you're in the market for a charger. The only downside of this one is the noise, and it's the noise of this here power supply. My goodness, it is loud. On its own, this is absolutely fine and much quieter than the other stuff, but that's when you're running off a battery. This on itself pretty noisy, so bear that into consideration. It's kind of like all chargers have a fan that will go when you're charging at a relatively high rate. This makes a noise. This makes a noise. It's just this makes more of a noise. And that depends where you're charging. I mean, I'm always in the room with my batteries when I'm charging because that's like a safety consideration. So it can kind of like slightly put me off stuff. I mean, you know, I can put headphones in, but I couldn't record anything like to video or voiceover because you'd hear this zzzz in the background. Aside from that, the features of this guy basically do combine the other two HobbyMate chargers, which I really like, which is really fantastic. So all the features and what it does, fantastic. The only downside is that noise. But I like the fact They go together. I know that's a little thing, but you know, small things, small minds. But yeah, really like it. It's going to go hand in hand with this one as my sort of go-to charger. This will be in daily use, both as a charger and as desktop power supply for my soldering iron. So should anything change, should anything go wrong, should I notice anything else, should there be new firmware updates that do something, then I can always make an update video for you. But in the meantime, thanks to HobbyCool for sending this out for review. And of course you can find links down below for where you can check this out in more detail. And as I said, there's the playlist that I already linked to, which tells you about all the other chargers in the range. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful, and I'll catch you next one. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing. And if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.